What does it really take to master your messaging? There's a lot of things that go into it. And after working with over 1,400 students, we become very clear on some principles or almost universal laws that have to happen in order for you to master your messaging. In fact, every single person that I see, even if they haven't worked with us, like the people that are thriving at the top, have mastered some or all of these things, even if they're not aware that they have. And that's totally possible. And maybe some of you guys have already mastered some of the things here today, but there are some things that you haven't mastered yet that are keeping you stuck. So if you feel like you're unheard, you're putting out great content, no one's paying attention, you can't get anyone to buy your stuff. You know your offer's great. You know you're great at what you do, but people don't seem to realize it. Or maybe you're the type of person who goes like, once people just see me coach, once they see me teach, once they see me work with people, they'll want to buy, but I just can't communicate that in my messaging. Well, guess what? That's a messaging problem. And you may not have all 8 of these working together. So what we want to do in this episode is dive into what it really takes to master your messaging. Here we go. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Excited to have you guys here. Today we are talking about, you guessed it, messaging. Today we are talking about messaging, and this last couple of weeks, last week or two, we've been talking about messaging, and the next continued week or so, we are going to continue talking about messaging as well. And I try to mix it up on this podcast a little bit, talk about a bunch of different things, but we are launching NGM, New Generation Mastery, which is our flagship program all about messaging. We are launching it coming up pretty soon. And so we're just going to dive into a lot of messaging related topics over the next couple weeks, which, by the way, this may actually be the last time we launch the program, especially using the Master Your Messaging 3-day series. So if we do it again in the future, we don't actually have plans of launching the program again. And it's still going to be around. You can still get in. It's just not going to be done in a launch format, which means that the Master Your Profitable Messaging 3-day event, this might actually be the last one that we do. And I say might because the plan is to not do it again, but you never know. I might get a hair at my butt and decide to do it next year or 2 years from now or something like that, because I do enjoy doing them. But we are just transitioning our business to be as launch free as we can, or if we do, the launches are more of just a fun thing we decide to do. So this is, if you've been on the fence or you've been like wanting to attend one of our 3-day events, which are always super insightful and a ton of breakthroughs and hot seats. And it's just a great time. Like, we have so many things planned over the next 30 days, even inside our Facebook group to help you guys with messaging. We have a ton of free PDFs and frameworks and ad examples. In fact, we're going to be giving out for free inside of our Facebook group a complete psychological and messaging breakdown of one of our best performing ads that has been a result of over $1 million in sales for free inside of that Facebook group. So we have a ton of cool things planned like that. And obviously all of that stuff, we dive way deeper inside of our program as well. And so I'm really excited over the next, 4 or 5 weeks or so to just dive into messaging and communication with you guys. In today's episode, that's what we're going to do. We're going to dive right into what it really takes to have effective messaging. So through all the stuff we've been doing over the last couple months or so, I've had to even go through my own process of uncovering our new messaging. What is the new thing that we are going to do? And what is the new thing we're going to offer? And what's the new way to present this? And even in our 3-day training, there's new information I'm going to bring up and bring to light. In messaging for me, I'm coming up with what are some metaphors and analogies I've never used before? What are some examples or stories I've never used before? And so even for myself over the last couple months, all we've been doing is just testing messaging and evolving messaging. And so I've gone through my own process Like I've gone through our messaging philosophy and structure and program to uncover what our next messaging involvement actually is. And so in that process, I've uncovered a couple things of what it really takes. And obviously we've been diving a lot deeper with a good group of students inside of our NGM Plus. It's our 6-month mentorship program. And we've been diving into like webinars and ads and emails and getting DMs from content with them. And so with working with all of them, it's starting to see what it really takes to be successful, but have really effective messaging in 2023, because things are changing. And you guys have probably realized that. You've probably felt it. Like things are changing really fast. And so, we do have the recession and inflation and all that stuff kind of going on. I haven't noticed that, bringing a huge downward spiral of sales that much, like maybe a little bit. Like it takes people, a little bit longer to see like, oh, do I really want to spend the money on this? But what we have found is if you can really demonstrate you understand a problem, and it is a problem that someone doesn't want anymore, they will still pay. And that decision to buy is a lot quicker. Like we just haven't seen a need for like a 3-month runway anymore. And we just realized like people's buying decisions are happening a lot faster now. And so that's a great thing. But also at the same time, what's also happening is, and this, to me, this is the real danger. This is the real problem with what's going on in the course creator or program space or even service provider space, is that there's oversaturation. There are so many businesses that don't want to be online anymore, don't want to be offline anymore. They want to be online. So yoga studios, therapists, doctors, health professionals, trainers, and people that like personal trainers. There's just so many people that can do their stuff online and reach the world. And, for people like you and me, have known about this for a while. You've known that you can create a course. Have known there's this whole online space, and you've known it for a while. There's a whole world of people that just discovering this for the very first time. Like they didn't know this was a thing until like the last year or two. And so what's happening is you have a flood of experts coming into this space. A flood. There is a ton of them. And that's the biggest problem, is that a lot of them don't have their messaging figured out. And if you don't have your messaging figured out, you're going to sound just like the million other people out there. And you might be experiencing that right now. If you're the type of person that's been putting out gold, your content's really effective, or you think it's really effective, you think it's really good, you're really proud of it, you're like, oh my God, this is going to help a lot of people, and no one's watching, no one's listening, and no one's converting into sales or even DMing you or reaching out to you, you have a messaging problem. And you're not standing out, you're not convincing or conveying why someone needs you in a way that makes sense to them. And the most effective messaging that we have seen work is when you have messaging that's so effective that the audience comes to their own conclusion that they trust you, they trust your ability to solve their problem, they like you as a person, and that you're the person that they need to come fix their problem. That's the biggest thing, is how do we change our communication? How do we change our messaging so that they come up with their own conclusions that you're the person that can solve their problem, that you're the person that they need to work with. And that's the battle. That's the biggest thing. And so what we have done is I've kind of gone through 8 points or 8 elements or things that you need to do or be aware of if you really want your messaging to be as effective as possible. If you're the type of person that wants to be dedicated and fix this problem, which I think is really smart, then I have 8 things that you're going to have to go through, and you're going to have to embrace all 8. And if you don't embrace all 8, you can probably still get, a big improvement on your messaging. But if you really want to master it, you want to be that person that's the number one in your space, you're in your own category, these are the things that you need. Now, I want to be very clear on what I mean by in your own category. So when I say in your own category, what I mean is, like, for me, for example, I teach messaging and I teach communication and I teach content, right? I'm not the only messaging expert out there. I'm not the only one talking about content or things like that. And then there's a lot of people that are have great courses on marketing or evergreen strategies or launching strategies or whatever that teach messaging within their programs. So there's a lot of people teaching messaging, and I'm thrown into that field. I'm not in my own space in that sense. Here's where I become my own space is the interpretation of the audience puts me in my own space. When they start hearing me talk or communicate, and that might be you on this podcast, you might be like, I'd pay attention to Brandon and his messaging over anyone else's because he just talks about it differently. It makes more sense to me. He breaks down big concepts in a way that makes sense. He gives me ahas. He brings realizations I never realized before. He gives perspectives I've never thought of before. He can explain why something is happening or a problem is existing that I didn't realize before. And so I'm not in my own space. I'm not the only person teaching messaging, but in your eyes, in your mind, the way in which I communicate is different than everyone else, which in your mind puts me into my own category. I become the person who teaches messaging, but communicates messaging in this specific way that no one else does. And that's what I want for you guys is when messaging is dialed in, your audience, new audience, people never even heard of you before go like, wow, I've never heard of weight loss talked about like that before. I've never realized that parenting should be communicated this way before. I never realized that's why my kids cry when I do this, or I never realized that I didn't have connection with my kids because of X, Y, and Z. This person here really helped me with that, or opened up my eyes to that, or I didn't realize this. You just have a different way of communicating. And again, it could be yoga, it could be anything like, mixing essential oils. It could be yoga poses or how you talk about yoga. It could be weight loss. It could be how to find your passion. We want to figure out and discover the things that other people haven't discovered so you can teach and communicate in a way that other people can't. And that's what I mean is when these 8 things are dialed in, that is the effect that you start to have in everything: ads, emails, webinars, live streams, sales mechanisms like video series and challenges. Again, it doesn't matter. Any form of communication. So with that being said, why don't we dive into all 8 of these things as I grab a drink of water. Been talking a lot today. The voice is parse. The voice needs some water. And let's start with number 1. So number 1, it's going to sound very cliche. You're going to be like, okay, Brandon, I might get some eye rolls with number 1, but hear me out. Number 1 is understanding your people. Okay. Now, if you've been a listener of the podcast for any amount of time, you know that I would never just make a generalized statement like that and then move on. And that's what most people do is they're like, go get the know, like, and trust. And it's like, okay, great. How do we do that? And the person's like, I don't know, but I've heard 10 million other experts say get the know, like, and trust. So I'm just going to regurgitate that and teach it, right? I am anti that. We don't do that here. So let me break down what I mean when I say understanding your people. There's 3 elements that we like to start with when it comes to understanding your people. Now, obviously inside our program, NGM and NGM Plus, we have a process to go a little bit deeper. And it's not like an exercise you're going to sit down behind your computer and figure out in like an hour. This is an ongoing process that deepens the longer you go through our philosophy. And even for me, I'm still discovering a lot of new things around my audience and people that I want to attract and a lot of that stuff. But very simply, I'm just going to break it down into 3 major things. These 3, even though there's more, the 3 major things here will give you a pretty big improvement of the understanding you currently have of your audience. So number 1 is who. So you need to understand who you're communicating to. But again, that's still very generalized. So let's go even deeper on the who. There's a couple elements that we like to start with. Okay. So number 1 is who, but what are the values of that person? So it's like, yeah, you know who you're talking to. So like I'm talking to moms or busy moms or entrepreneurs or dads or investors or active people, outdoorsy people. Like who are you talking to? Who is that person? And number 1 is what are their values? Or another way to look at it is what are the values of the people you want to attract? Like if you could pick the ideal client, what are their values? What do they value? And I want to know what that is. So this could be everything from like family or money or being authentic or, you know, did I say family? I'm just going to rattle off my values, which is like family, business, success, money, fun, adventure. Those are all values of mine. And then what we do is you just kind of go through and be like, okay, cool. Like which ones are relevant to the people that I want to attract? So for me, like, yeah, family is number one for me, but, and it's going to be for most people, but I also have to decide, well, what part of that value do I want to incorporate into my brand? Because family could mean like, I'm just a family man. It could just mean parent, but I don't lean too much into the parent identity or value in my brand. A little bit, I sprinkle it in a little bit, but I don't care if I work with parents or non-parents. It doesn't matter to me. Like it doesn't matter if you're a parent or non-parent. If you're an entrepreneur who wants to make a change, I'll work with you. And so that's why I have to go through the values. So I look at the values of who I want to attract. Number two is the beliefs. What beliefs do they have? This one's really important. This one's really important because there's different types of beliefs you have to go through. The most important belief that we have to tackle is what is the belief they have that is causing the problem they're experiencing. And every single one of us has some sort of problem in our life. And I almost guarantee it, like 99% of the time, that problem is existing because there's some sort of belief, whether it's conscious or subconscious, doesn't matter, that is causing them to experience that problem. So, you know, for example, a belief that my audience might have, or you might have, is that how-to content is how to build a business online. And then you post a ton of great content that has a lot of great information, but never gets the traction. And you just do it over and over again because you have this belief, because that's what's been indoctrinated to us through this series of gurus over the years, that how-to information by itself is all you need. Just to give your best stuff away for free, bury people in value. It's like, how many times have we heard that regurgitated message? So for me, I know my audience. I'm like, I know that's a belief that they have. So there's other beliefs we want to tackle, but I think for now that's probably good. Just to kind of, you know, I don't want to overwhelm you guys with too much stuff, but some of the other beliefs might be beliefs you have around the space and business that you can form connection with. But again, when we look at who and understanding of people, who, it's values, beliefs, again, is identity. So identity is number one or number three. And that would be, you know, if they said, I am, what is the blank after that? I am a father, a husband, an entrepreneur, a business owner. Like, what are their identities? Because we're going to use that in our messaging. So that's number three. And then the fourth thing of the who is going to be their desires. What do they want to achieve that they can't achieve? And that's going to break down the who. Okay. So when we get to number one, which is understanding your people, we have to understand who they are. And there's 4 ways to understand who they are. The next thing we need to know about our people to really understand them is the specific problems they're experiencing. The way I describe this to our students is that this is an unwanted experience. What is an unwanted experience that they have in their reality, in their life, that they don't want anymore? And it blows my mind how many people don't know this. It blows my mind how many people don't actually know the problem that they solve. And then sometimes when I ask them, the problem's so generalized, they're like, oh, the people are just overwhelmed. It's like, cool. You think if you're going to connect to someone by saying, are you overwhelmed? It's like, no, it's not going to work. The way I like to describe this is if you went into a doctor and you had a bunch of symptoms that you've had for a really long time, and a doctor takes one look at you and just goes through and nails every single symptom to as specific as possible, you're going to be like, oh my God, how did you know that? That's exactly what I'm dealing with. Are you like in my head? And a lot of people don't know the actual problems. And one of the reasons why a lot of people can't generate sales is because even if they do tackle the problem, they decide on a problem that people don't want to pay in order to get solved. It's not a big enough pain point. So we need to, number one, uncover what are the problems they're experiencing that my skills and knowledge can solve. But number two is, what's a problem that's so big that they're willing to pay in order to get it fixed? And the bigger the problem, the more you can charge. The smaller the problem, the less you're going to charge. And that's just the way it is. So you have to understand the problems. And again, one of the biggest blocks or mistakes that people make with messaging is they go, here's my skills and here's my knowledge. Let me just teach that. And they never ask, is this solving a problem for people? What is the problem that I solve for people? And so there's a lot of reasons why that disrupts your messaging, hurts your messaging. But the first one is like you aren't meeting people where they're at and they're at problems. You're not making them feel understood. You're not becoming relevant to their specific situation. And so the list goes on, but I'll stop there because we have a lot to get through. So then the next thing that we need to figure out when it comes to understanding our people is we went through the who. There's 4 elements of the who. Now we need to figure out the struggle. So there's the problems, the pain. The last one is mistakes causing the struggle. So what are they doing right now? Sometimes that's what are they not doing right now, but it's more powerful if you can figure out what they are doing right now that is causing that problem, causing their pain, because they're doing something to cause the pain. Otherwise it wouldn't exist. Like if they just, were inside in bed all day long, they likely wouldn't have the problem that you fix. They're doing something that is causing that problem. So we got to uncover what that is. And by the way, guys, figuring out these mistakes and problems and things like that, it's likely not going to happen just by sitting down and brainstorming. Like this is a discovery process. You're going to have to work with people. You're going to have to get in the trenches and work with them, talk to them, maybe look at your own past experience. You're going to have to test and see what works and what doesn't work, what's resonating and not resonating. So, like you could sit down and figure it out, but it doesn't mean it's going to be the best. So, part of messaging is taking action and testing and tweaking. Okay. All right. So understanding our people. Number 1 is understanding your people. We talked about the who, we talked about the struggle. The last element of understanding your people is what I call attempts. What have they done to attempt to solve the problem on their own? What have they done to attempt the problem or attempt to fix the problem on their own? And this is what they do to try to fix the problem that doesn't work. What is a mistake they are making to try to fix the problem? So for example, with my audience, I know that if you've been plateaued in audience and sales for like 3 months or more, I know what you're likely doing to cause the problem is you're likely focusing 70% or more of your content on how-to and educational content. You're speaking from your skills and knowledge and not the problems. And in order to fix it, you probably just post more, hoping that one day things will change. You try to move to a different platform thinking the platform is an issue, or you have tried a new content strategy thinking a strategy is the problem. And those are 3 attempts that you have made to fix a problem that don't work. And so the reason why this is so important is let's just look at what I did with you. I talked about the problem. I talked about why it's causing the problem. And I just said, here's the attempts you made to try to fix the problem. What that demonstrates is a complete understanding of your specific situation. And if you find yourself experiencing what I just said, the subconscious rapport that I just built with you goes through the roof. You're like, this person gets it. They understand me. I feel heard. I feel understood. And that right there is the first step of really effective content messaging. And that happens in your upfront content. Then when you continue with that through your sales mechanisms and your ads and your emails, it's just really, really powerful. Okay. So that's number 1, understanding your people. And I broke down how to do that. Again, it's understand who that person is. So values, their beliefs, their identities, and their desires. We have to understand their struggle, which is their problems, specific problems, the specific pains they're going through, and the mistakes causing those problems and pains. And again, specific, what are the specific actions? And then we also have to understand their attempts. What have they attempted to do to fix a problem that doesn't work, that they are unaware of? When you have all this mapped out, and again, this has to happen through a process. You're not going to figure it out by sitting behind the computer screen and surveying your audience and looking at their survey results. You have to go out and discover this on your own. That means you're going to have to test. You're going to have to put things out. You're going to have to pay attention to what the behavior shows you. And what I mean by that is like what's getting the most likes, what's getting the most comments, what's getting the most response, what emails are getting the best open rates, what emails are getting the best click-through rates. The behavior will show up in the form of data, and that will allow us to figure out what's working and what's not. Okay. So let's move on to number 2. Number two, the second element you need to really make messaging work is mastery. And I hate to say it because there are a lot of people, and there might be some of you guys on the call, and I know as soon as I say this, some of you are going to be like, shoot, that's me. And I don't want to discourage you. Okay. So if you find that you are the person that I'm about to describe, do not get discouraged. What this means is it should be a wake-up call to get your butt into gear to finally start focusing on mastery. And I can give some tips on how to do that. Okay. So there are a lot of people that are what I would call regurgitation teachers or regurgitation experts. What this is you have a lot of degrees, whether it's a bachelor degrees or a master degree, doesn't matter. You have degrees, you have certifications, but you have little to no experience actually getting the result that you promise for people. So here's what I mean by this is you're the person who got a degree on how to ride a bike, but you've never ridden a bike, but you're super qualified in the form of degrees and certifications, but you just have never done it before. So now you're going to be the coach or the expert who needs to go out there, who's going to go out there and try to sell people, I can teach you how to ride a bike, even though you've never done it yourself and you've never done it for anyone else. And there's nothing wrong with that because there is power in information. And where it becomes a problem is that when you need to understand your people, you're going to be limited. So when I told you need to find their struggle, their specific pains, the mistakes they're making, you only get that through experience. The only way you're going to ever know what those are is because you've gone through it yourself. You've done it for other people. You've uncovered stuff. When you need to speak to emotions and mistakes and how people are feeling and what their scenarios are and what their problems really are, how on earth are you going to be able to do that when you're only focusing on more degrees and certifications, more information? So again, you'll probably be able to regurgitate great information to them that can be helpful, but someone who has more experience than you is going to be able to come in and just resonate with the audience way deeper than you. And that's why like my communication with messaging is like, yeah, I understand messaging and I can communicate well, but I also know these things because I've worked with 1,400 students. I've gotten in the trenches of $1 million launches. I've done $1 million launches. Not only that, but we had an agency. So I was doing messaging for people like Jim Fortin and Mel Abraham and Stacy Tuchel and James Wedmore and Casey Morris. And I've written and Dr. Shannon Irvin. I've written Casey's and Shannon's and James's video series, like different niche, different people. I've been in the trenches. I understand what their struggles were, why they needed my help. I knew how to communicate their stuff to their audience better than they did because I understood messaging, which I just gained a mastery over it by working with so many people, doing it in the trenches. And I'll tell you that having an agency was one of the best and worst things I've ever done. And it was best because I gained such a fast level of mastery over my craft, but it was a lot of freaking work. And I think that's why a lot of people won't do it is even if you find you don't have experience, one of the fastest way to get it is just like work for free. And a lot of people won't do that because it's going to be very time consuming stuff, but I can promise you're going to get such a great level of experience and mastery and be able to communicate things a lot better than everyone else. Not only that, but your teachings are going to be better. Like, think about it. If you wanted to learn how to ride a bike, would you rather learn from the person who has 5 degrees that cost them $100,000? Or would you rather learn from the person who's like been riding a bike and doing really well riding a bike for the last 10 years? Maybe they've won races and they can do mountain biking and street. They know the bike inside and out. Like, I personally would rather learn and have a teacher who has been actually doing the thing they teach versus someone who's regurgitating. So that's number 2 is you just have to have a level of mastery over your craft and you have to be doing it for people and yourself, getting those results. And if you don't have that, then go out and get it. It's as simple as that. I don't want to sugarcoat it. You're going to have to go out and get it. Like, put in the work. You're just going to have to do that. If you want that level of mastery. Is it possible to do this without having a level of mastery and experience? Yeah, 100%. And, your mastery is going to have to come through the students that you work with or something like that. But again, we need some sort of experience if you really want to be like the top of the top, to have the best messaging, the most depth. You need to have that experience. And again, if you don't, totally fine. Even in our programs, sometimes we have people that come in who are like, Brandon, I don't have the mastery yet. I'm like, great, no worries. We're going to figure it out. We'll have you go try, and we'll have you do some trial and error, and we'll test and tweak, and we'll figure it out. And in that process, you will gain your mastery, but it is required. So that actually moves me to number 3, which is, if you really want to master your messaging, we focus more on testing, data, and behavior. And so here's what I mean by this is that, I love the quote from Henry Ford. Some of you may have heard me say it before, where he says that, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. And so that is equivalent of what a survey result would provide. And we have to look at, what are they really telling you? And what they're really telling you is not that they wanted a faster horse. They just wanted to go faster, but their mind couldn't comprehend a way to go faster besides using a horse. And so that's what the problem is with survey results. So if we looked at people's behavior and we saw that they wanted cars and more automobiles, we started to realize, okay, the behavior shows us that they actually want the car because it goes faster, and they don't want a faster horse. And for example, if we would have put a horse that can run 25 miles an hour versus a car that goes 20 miles an hour, they probably still would have even chosen the car. So their behavior shows us, okay, they actually want cars, and we shouldn't be investing in horses. Okay. So what I look for is behavior. What does the behavior show us? Because their behavior is subconsciously driven. They don't have to think about what their behavior is. They just take actions. It's just like this podcast episode. You guys, if you're still listening, you have decided to stay here, and you didn't have to think about it. You just automatically are like, I want to stay. This is interesting to me. I'm curious. I want to hear more. But the point is, it was an automated reaction or emotion you felt while I am speaking. And so again, the behavior shows me that is great. One of the best downloads, free PDFs that we offered in the last year has been our DM guide. So we have a guide that shows you how you could potentially get DMs in 72 hours from a single piece of content. That all started in September when I did a podcast episode on this podcast of 3 ways you can get DMs from content. That episode blew up. We were getting messages from people. I love it. Best episode ever. Da, 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 da. And I was like, well, the behavior is showing us that this topic is doing really well. Let's create a guide on it. The guide blew up. Let's create ads on it. The ads blew up. Let's do a webinar on it or a mini mastermind on it. That blew up. I'm like, okay, great. And I only uncovered that because I was paying attention to the behavior of my audience when I did a piece of content. And so what we do is anytime we need more pain points or we need to figure out ad copy or things like that, like when we write ads, we know on average about 25% of our ads will land, meaning that they will be producing high quality, low cost leads. And I know low cost is subjective, but for us, like anything in a launch, anything under $15 is generally good. Anything under $10 in a non-launch is pretty good. So we know that about 25% of our ads will land. And that's pretty good. So what that also means is that 75% of our ads will not work. And I don't know which ones will and won't until we try it. So for us, we adapted the testing philosophy inside of ads. And we know what we're doing pretty well. Like we've spent millions of dollars worth of ads profitably in the last year or two, a couple years maybe. So we know what we're doing and we still have to test. And so I think a lot of people, especially ones that come into the program, they just do all the exercises. They sit behind the computer, they map everything out, get everything perfect, put it into content and then post. I'm like that's such a waste. One of the philosophies in our program is to put it out quickly and learn from it. And that's what I recommend what you guys do is just like test and look at your content as a testing ground to figure out the messaging that works. And then what we have to do is read the data, learn how to understand what the data is telling you. If you understand the data, you understand the numbers, you'll know exactly where the problem is and you can start to fix the problem at that point, especially the numbers in the funnel. Like in our NGM Plus program, we tell all of our students there, here are the numbers at a minimum we should be hitting at every stage of your funnel. And we're going to start at number 1. And if you're not hitting the numbers at number 1, that's where the messaging breakdown is. And wherever the messaging breakdown is, we can look just by the numbers and the data and know exactly what's broken. And we know it's broken because your messaging is off. There's something off in your communication that's causing people to not take the next step. So we start to look at that. But we also look at is just the behavior. So we look at the behavior. So this means watch time, likes, comments, shares. Then we take that data and then we test to see if we can improve the data. And then we, continue that process. But that's what messaging really is trial and error and testing. And obviously, like our program, the way I explain our program is our program will get you 70 to 90% of the way there of where you need to be. Testing and learning the data and maneuvering based off the data and then taking that data and going through our messaging process again is how we get it to 100% effectiveness. And it is required. So you got to pay attention to that. All right. Number 4 is more of a tactical, tangible thing. You need to change the way you communicate. If you really want to know what it takes to have great messaging, you have to change the way you communicate. Most people will communicate by over-explaining or explaining or talking about why they're right or why they're better. My style of communication is let me communicate in a way that gets people to come to their own conclusions that they have the problem I solve, that I'm the one who can solve their problem. Let me, when I finally get to teaching them, let me teach by shifting their perspective, by showing that and demonstrating, I understand where you're at, what you're doing, what you're trying. Let me discredit all that. And then let me paint the new way after that. Like that's the flow and how I communicate. And again, this is the same way I communicate with my kids. It's the same way I communicate with my wife. Well, maybe not so much with my wife, because she knows she's on to me. She knows what a sleight of mouth pattern is. She knows what a counterexample is. She knows when I'm in a Brandon persuasive mode. But like my kids, for example, the way I communicate with our team and our coaches and stuff like that. I'm also very self-aware of what my worst communication pattern is. And that is emotional speaking or emotional responding is my worst communication trait that I still have to work on, which is like, what is my automated reaction to something that's usually emotionally driven? And when I do that, I'm not in great communicator mode. I'm not thoughtful and intentional with what I'm saying. So I think being self-aware is really important as well. But you have to understand, and I explain this to the students when they come into our program, you guys have to have compassion for yourself. You have to cut yourself a break. You have to have fun with it. This should be fun. Messaging is a game. Life is a game. Business is a game. Like figuring out the messaging is a game. It's fun. And you have to give yourself compassion because, some of you will come into our program and you might be 50, 60, 70 years old, which means for the last 50, 60, 70 years, you've communicated one way and you now have to undo 50, 60, 70 years of one way of communication and learn a different way of communicating. Maybe you over-explain and you have to stop that now. Or maybe you just aren't a great storyteller and you just have to figure out how to tell a story a great way. Or maybe you've tried to sell by talking about features and benefits, and now you have to be more disciplined to wait to talk about that till a webinar. And in your upfront content, you have to learn to talk more about what people are dealing with and going through, the mistakes they're making, and build that rapport and all of that stuff. So you have to understand, if you really want to master your messaging, you're going to have to change the way in which you communicate. And to be honest with you, this is probably maybe the most difficult thing, but we try to make it as easy as possible by giving you frameworks that you can memorize and understand and try. And we give you script templates and just so much stuff to try. But like, if you're going to go live on a live stream or talk on a stage or do a live webinar, like, you're not going to be able to sit behind a computer screen and just fill in a script template. You're literally going to have to change the way in which you communicate. And you can, it's possible, because we have a lot of people doing it. I've done it myself, but that is something that will happen if you really want to master your messaging. The next thing you need if you want to master your messaging is to have personal power. And the reason why this is so important is you have to be able to say what you want to say. You have to be able to live your dharma. You have to be authentic in your message. You can't be swayed and influenced by other people, the external world. You can't be influenced by, the fear of haters. So personal power means that you stand up with confidence. You say what you want to say. You do what you want to do. and it's an internal focus, not an external focus. Now, again, we do want to pay attention to the data. So the data will dictate kind of what we say and how we say it. But what I'm trying to get at is like, we're not going to sway our message because we think our audience won't like it, even though it's something deep down that we know we want to say. We're not going to change what we say or what we teach or do because we're worried what our parents are going to think or what we got a degree in. We're not going to change what we say or what we do because we're afraid of getting canceled. We're not afraid of the haters. We're not afraid of what people will think. We say what we want to say, but we let the data and the testing show us how to say it. And we allow the data to tell us what to say and when. So let me give you an example. I don't let anyone influence what I say if it's something that I really want to say or the direction we head. I will take advice from my team and things like that. But if I feel strongly about something and it's my message and I want to say it, I will say it, and I will say it the way I want to say it. But then when it comes to sales, I might listen to the data and I might be selective with what I'm saying. So for example, I say a lot of things. I talk about thought reversals and taking a stand and personal power and a lot of that stuff. But I recently found out like 6 months ago, this idea of getting DMs from content worked really well. So I want to talk about that stuff. That is a part of my message. But now when it comes to selling, I'm like, let's just dive into that for this one funnel. And that one funnel becomes about that one piece of content. So I do let the data dictate when it comes to the sales, but you have to understand when we do that, that's still underneath my message of what I want to say. So I'm just picking a little piece of it. And personal power allows us to do that. And again, personal power isn't a force. It's not being forceful. It's being powerful. And there's a difference. It's not, and people can feel it. Like, you can come into my brand and say whatever you want. I really don't care. And if it's something where it's like constructive criticism, great. Like I might pay attention to it, but I'm not going to change what I want to say because you got offended by it. I don't really care. Maybe if I make a misstep and offend a million people, like I would take that into consideration. Maybe I kind of misstep there or whatever. But the point is I don't have a fear of getting canceled. And I know no one's going to cancel me. The only way I'm going to get canceled is if I cancel myself. And I get into fear and get into worry and get to concern. And then I start moving away from my dharma and my purpose. But I believe to my core that if you're going after your dharma, going after your purpose, going after what you want and saying what you want, and then paying attention to the data to figure out how do we say this thing so that it lands in the best way, I don't think you can lose. I think it's just a matter of time before you find the right message that works. And that's going to take personal power. Because the fact of the matter is, if you do have something important to say, you do have a process that you know works, it might go against what other people. And if you truly are a little bit different than everyone else, you're probably going to get haters. You're going to get people that don't agree with you and things like that. And that's fine. That's part of the game. It's part of what happens here in the space. But we need our personal power to maintain progress and keep everything moving forward. So number 6, the next one is actually silence. And this is a big part of our program. We have meditations for this. We have all sorts of stuff inside the program. But silence is basically turning off the thinking mind. And part of the reason why we lose our personal power is because we let our thinking mind run amok, take us down certain paths, run us into fear, run us into worry. But when we silence our mind, the fear is gone. The worry is gone. The fear of haters is gone. And what it does is it leaves room for whatever you want to call it, the universe, God, whatever. It allows for ideas to pop in to your head. And my belief on it personally is that when we silence the thinking mind, we can access higher dimensions of consciousness or awareness. And the way I like to look at it is it's messages from our higher self guiding us closer to our dharma. And when we silence the thinking mind, we can access messages or something from our soul. And our soul is going to speak from dharma, alignment, purpose. The problem is we get so caught up in the 3D world that we lose focus of that connection that we have to our higher self, to our soul. And silence allows us to find those messages. You get beautiful answers, and we've all experienced it before. When you're in the shower and you have those shower thoughts, like the best ideas in the showers, or sometimes even like, I should have said this in the argument. Oh my God, it's so good. Instead of focusing on what you should have said in the argument, it's like, what could you have said to overcome an objection? Or what could you have said to resonate with your audience a little bit more? What is a great connection piece? Or, sometimes you journal and you get into the quote, the zone, and you just journal so fast you can't even write things down. The ideas are popping so fast. That is what I mean by silence, is that doesn't happen because you're thinking your way there. It's happening because you're letting the answers come to you. And I don't know where the answers come to. I like to think that it is from our higher self or our soul, or from the universe, or some sort of higher power, but whatever you want to call it, that works for you. I don't really care. Like, just however you want to describe it to yourself so that it makes sense. But the fact of the matter is when we turn the thinking mind off, we do get ideas. We do get thoughts. We do uncover our message. Again, I believe that it is from our higher self, from our soul, giving us the answers, leading us deeper into our dharma and into our purpose. So that's number 6. Number 7 is remembering that you have to repeat this process. I think a lot of people come into the program and they're like, cool, I'm just going to go through this one time and get my messaging figured out. And that is great and awesome and wonderful. And there are some people that can go through it one time and just like totally up level. Like, I remember Bob Helig, for example, came into our program and he went through it. He was in our mentorship program, went through it, and he went from like 2 million to 4 million within a year because his messaging was just boom, just took him to that next level. But the thing is like that you're going to find another plateau at some point. And when you do, you need to go through that process again. And that's what we went through this year. I went through that process again. I went through it in my own head. Like, what is our unique mechanism? What is our unique solution? What is all of this stuff? What is our pain points? And what are the problems our audience is going through? And we went through that again. So you have to understand, if you really want to be the master of messaging, it's a journey that doesn't stop. And the beautiful thing about our program, the flagship program, is that you pay once, you get lifetime access. So you go through it multiple times. And you're going to have to go through it multiple times. And the reason why is every time you go through it, it brings you to a new level of awareness. You uncover certain things, you know certain things, you discover certain things. But then when you go through it again, you're not going through it with the same lens or perspective that you had the first time around. You have a new perspective, a higher level of awareness, a higher level perspective. And then that allows you to find even deeper answers. So every time you go through the process, you go deeper and deeper and deeper. And eventually you find yourself where your audience thinks and sees you as you being in your own space. And so number 8 is none of that's going to happen if you can't critically think. So one of the best things you can do is be a critical thinker if you want great messaging. One of the reasons why I have such great messaging and realizations and things like that is because I don't believe everything everyone tells me. I ask myself, is this really the best way? Why does that problem exist? Why have I been doing everything everyone tells me to do, and why isn't it working? Where are the mistakes? Where are the flaws? And I start asking questions. I don't believe just because every guru tells me that I need to do how to do content, I don't believe that right off the bat. I don't believe that just because someone told me YouTube is the best thing you can do for your business, that it is the right thing for me or the business or for everyone. Just because someone told me to go onto TikTok and do short form videos, I critically think about, is this the best thing for my message? Is it going to resonate with me? Is that really what I want to do? How do I want to show up? I have some friends that have a ton of followers, but they document everything in their life. And that's great because it works for them and they enjoy it. I personally wouldn't want to do that. I don't want to have to be on Instagram stories every single day. I wouldn't want to have to do share like every life update that I have. I have a private life and I want that private. I have work and I have family. I don't want to be documenting every little freaking thing all the time. I want to be on social media as little as possible. So for me, I'm like, when people tell me, oh, you got to document everything and share this and da-da-da-da-da, I critically think about it. Do I have to? Can I find examples of other people who didn't do that or are successful? Oh yeah, I can. Well, maybe I should listen to that person or blah, 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 right? So the same thing when you're trying to find industry norms. Like, what are these norms that everyone is teaching that don't work anymore? They're just not aware of it. But again, you have to be able to critically think about everything that you're doing, about what the industry is doing, what doesn't work in the industry, so you can notice trends or you can present different information that people haven't heard before. But we have to be critical thinkers if we want to have great messaging. All right, so let's recap what we have here. If you want to know what it takes to really have great messaging, again, I broke it down to 8 things. Number 1, understand your people, which means understanding who they are, their struggle, and their attempts they've made to fix the problems. Number 2 is we need mastery. Number 3, we need testing data and paying attention to behavior. Number 4 is you have to change the way in which you communicate, which means different language patterns, different forms of communication. 5, we need personal power. Number 6, you need silence. Number 7 is you have to understand that you need to repeat this process over and over and over again. It's not going to end. And then number 8 is you have to be a critical thinker. So those are the 8 things that it will take in order to have great messaging. And if you need more help with this, you want more tactical stuff, I know we have some trainings coming up. But if you want to live in an environment inside of a community that lives, eats, and breathes this all day, this is one of the fastest ways to actually change it, to repeat it. Again, especially when it comes to changing the way you communicate. NGM, our flagship program in NGM Plus, will be opening up soon. And so if you're like, Brandon, everything you're saying makes sense, I'm sick and tired of dealing with this problem, well, get ready, because we can help you fix it. And I would love to help you fix it. And I'm really looking forward to that. And if you've been a listener of the podcast, here's one thing that we've realized over the years is that when people know they have a problem and know that you can help them fix the problem and they don't enroll, it's just a matter of time before they do. So, sometimes you have people go through our launches or see our offer 4 or 5 times before they buy. And that's what we've noticed. And it's the same thing with your people is when people know that they have a problem, know you can fix it, even if they say no, they could come back later in the buying cycle and end up buying. And what we've realized is that in order to scale a business, you need to present your offer to people multiple times in order for them to buy, especially if they still have the pain that you solve. And what I'm going to say to you guys with this being possibly one of our last launches, again, there will be opportunities to get in. We're not closing down the program or anything like that. We're just doing a different form of selling. But also with this being possibly the last time we're going to do the 3-day thing is if you're serious about your messaging, you know that it's something that you need to get fixed, why wait 4 or 5 times to see the offer before getting in? Because it's just wasted time. So what I'm saying to you is if there's any inkling of like, I might need this, I might need help, I love what Brandon's saying, make sure you're at least there for the 3-day event. It's completely free. All you have to do is invest your time. It's an hour or 2 for 3 days. So it's a total of 3 to 6 hours. And just the 3-day event could be enough to transform your messaging and start to get it fixed. And I believe to my core that is the sole reason why most people can't make it inside of this business is because they just haven't learned a way to communicate that drives demand and connects with their audience. So if that's you, make sure you guys are there. I would love to see you there. And that's it for this episode. So take care, everyone. We will talk to you all next week. Peace out. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.